In the shadowed recesses of the Ottoman Empire, where the Sultan's absolute authority echoed through marble halls and the harem's impenetrable walls safeguarded secrets capable of unraveling dynasties, the intimate lives of the Padishahs, those sovereign rulers tracing their lineage back to the legendary Osmani in the late 13th century, have long been enveloped in layers of myth, cultural misconception, and sensationalized Orientalist narratives, spanning from the empire's humble beginnings as a frontier principality in Anatolia to its grand dissolution. In the aftermath of World War I in 1922, the sexual experiences and personal desires of these sultans were far more than mere footnotes of private indulgence. They were intricately interwoven with the grand tapestry of dynastic politics, religious doctrines rooted in Islamic jurisprudence, and the rigid societal norms that governed one of history's most enduring empires. European travelers, diplomats, and writers, viewing through the prism of their own Victorian-era prudery or Enlightenment-era frequently depicted the Ottoman harem as an unending bacchanal of sensuality, replete with lavish orgies, beguiling seductresses who wielded hypnotic charms over besotted rulers, and a labyrinth of forbidden pleasures that defied moral boundaries. However, a closer examination of primary historical documents such as the detailed dispatches from Venetian ambassadors who infiltrated court circles, the meticulous Ottoman privy purse registers Hazine Defterleri that accounted for every aki spent on harem luxuries, and the vivid chronicles penned by insiders like the 17th-century traveler Evliya Çelebi or the historian Mustafa Ali paints a vastly more complex and disciplined picture. This is a realm where sexual relations were governed by stringent hierarchies, strategic reproductive imperatives, and deeply ingrained taboos that placed imperial stability and continuity above individual gratification. Drawing upon rigorous scholarly analyses, particularly Leslie P. Peirce's groundbreaking 1993 study, The Imperial Harem, Women and Sovereignty in the Ottoman Empire, which meticulously dissects archival evidence to reveal the harem's role as a political institution rather than a mere pleasure palace. This exploration seeks to delineate the boundaries between entrenched taboos and verifiable truths, separating salacious myth from substantiated historical fact. We will journey through the chronological evolution of the Sultan's sexual practices across centuries, spotlight key figures whose personal intimacies profoundly influenced historical tradition, and scrutinize the underlying power dynamics that transformed the harem into a veritable crucible for empire building, where human desires were harnessed as instruments of statecraft, loyalty, and legacy preservation. To set the stage, consider the broader cultural context. The Ottoman court was a melting pot of influences from Byzantine grandeur, Persian poetry, and Arab Islamic scholarship, all converging in Istanbul, the city that bridged east and west, where the Sultan's private chambers were as much a stage for geopolitical maneuvering as they were for personal encounters. To fully grasp the intricacies of Ottoman Sultans' intimate worlds, it is essential to first delineate the foundational architecture and operational framework of the imperial harem, formerly termed the Harem-i-Humayun, which functioned as the sacrosanct private domain encompassing the Sultan's immediate family, his potential consorts, and an extensive retinue of female servants and enslaved individuals. Contrary to the pervasive Western stereotype portraying it as a hedonistic enclave of idle luxury and unchecked eroticism, the harem etymologically derived from the Arabic root harem, signifying something forbidden, protected, or sacred, was an exalted sanctuary, comparable in its inviolability to revered Islamic holy sites such as the Kaaba in Mecca or the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. This sprawling complex, which in its heyday under sultans like Selim III in the late 18th century housed upwards of 700 inhabitants, included not only women selected for potential sexual companionship, but also the formidable Valid Sultan, the reigning sultan's mother, often the de facto ruler of the inner court, the sultan's unmarried sisters and daughters who were groomed for strategic marriages, and a cadre of eunuchs and slaves who ensured operational efficiency. The physical layout of the harem, especially after its relocation to the iconic Topkapi Palace in the 1530s during Suleiman's reign, was meticulously designed to reinforce this sacred seclusion. A maze of winding corridors patrolled by the authoritative chief black eunuch, Kizl, whose surgical castration rendered him a neutral guardian, incapable of posing any sexual threat to the Sultan's exclusivity, and residential quarters stratified by social rank, from communal dormitories for the novice, Khariz enslaved girls newly inducted into service at the hierarchy's base, too lavishly appointed, private suites for the most favored consorts at its pinnacle. Archival evidence from the privy purse registers of the 16th century onward provides granular insights into this administrative precision. Expenditures were scrupulously recorded for opulent clothing embroidered with gold thread, exquisite jewels sourced from Indian mines, and graduated stipends that reflected one's proximity to the Sultan, with promotions often directly correlated to milestones in sexual relations and successful reproduction. For instance, a concubine who captured the Sultan's fleeting attention might elevate from the rank of a simi, a raw novice undergoing training, to Gizdi, a favorite noticed for her beauty or wit, earning her a secluded chamber following an intimate encounter, and potentially ascending further to Iqbal, a secondary consort, or even Kedin, an official wife-like consort, upon conceiving a child. Yet, historical analyses underscore that only a minority, estimated at 10 to 20% by scholars like Peirce based on cross-referenced harem rosters, ever engaged in sexual activities with the Sultan. The majority were either married off to high-ranking Ottoman officials as rewards for loyalty, or retained in perpetual service to the valid Sultan, functioning as educators, seamstresses, or administrative aides within the harem's self-sustaining ecosystem. This ecosystem was not isolated. It interacted with the outer court through eunuch intermediaries, ensuring that the Sultan's desires were balanced against the empire's needs. With daily routines, including communal meals of pilaf and sherbet, music lessons on the oud, and religious observances that reinforced the harem's role as a microcosm of Ottoman society. The Sultan's engagements with their concubines were profoundly embedded within the overarching framework of dynastic politics, wherein sexual activity transcended personal fulfillment to become a calculated mechanism for ensuring the empire's longevity through the production of viable heirs. During the formative phases of the Ottoman state, from the reign of Osman I, era 1299 a 1326, through to Mehmed II the Conqueror r. 1451 to 1481, sultans frequently entered into legal marriages with princesses from allied foreign powers, such as Byzantine nobility or Anatolian beyliks, to forge diplomatic bonds and consolidate territorial gains, while concurrently maintaining concubines for both recreational pleasure and supplemental progeny. However, a transformative paradigm shift materialized by the mid-15th century, particularly solidified under Mehmed II's successors. The cessation of formal marriages to freeborn women, with all reproductive responsibilities devolved exclusively to enslaved concubines, a practice that aligned seamlessly with Islamic legal precedents permitting sexual relations with owned slaves kuris, provided they were not adherents of prohibited faiths or already wedded. This arrangement was far from arbitrary. It was underpinned by the one mother, one son doctrine, institutionalized during Mehmed I's rule era en 1413 a 1421, to mitigate fratricidal conflicts among potential heirs, stipulating that Sultan would generally discontinue intimate relations with a concubine once she had borne a single male child, thereby preventing any one mother from amassing disproportionate influence through multiple sons who might vie for the throne. Diplomatic dispatches from Venetian ambassadors in the 1520s, such as those authored by Luigi Bas, offer vivid eyewitness accounts of this ritualized selection process. The Sultan would periodically review parades of veiled women presented in the harem's central courtyard, choosing companions based on criteria ranging from physical allure to intellectual compatibility, with subsequent intimacies unfolding in secluded chambers under the vigilant oversight of the valid Sultan, who orchestrated access to avert favoritism that could destabilize court equity. Taboos permeated this domain with unyielding severity. Incestuous liaisons were unequivocally prescribed, with no credible historical instances documented among the sultans, and homosexuality, while occasionally rumored in the broader court milieu, for example, unsubstantiated whispers regarding Bazid II's inclinations in Evliya Çelebi's expansive travelogue was rigorously condemned under Sharia law as a capital offense. Though same-sex interactions among eunuchs or young page boys in the Ender-Yun inner palace school were sometimes overlooked if conducted with utmost discretion to avoid scandal. The harem's sacral character further amplified these prohibitions. As elaborated by Peirce in her exhaustive study, the sultans approached it not merely as a venue for carnal pursuits, but as a precinct of divine purity, often housing revered Islamic relics such as the Prophet Muhammad's sacred mantle, thereby intertwining the realms of the erotic and the spiritual in a manner that demanded utmost reverence and restraint. Moreover, the integration of Sufi mysticism into court life added another layer, with some sultans viewing sexual moderation as a path to spiritual enlightenment, drawing from teachings of orders like the Mevlevi.no. Comprehensive examination of Ottoman sultans' intimate spheres would be complete, without a focused lens on Suleiman the Magnificent, era 1520 a 1566, whose legendary union with Harem Sultan stands as a paragon of profound devotion while simultaneously shattering long-standing taboos, thereby reshaping the harem's socio-political landscape. Originally, Alexandra Lasowska, a young Ruthenian girl abducted during Tatar raids around 1517 and thrust into the slave markets of Istanbul, Harem bestowed her Persian moniker meaning the joyful one for her vivacious and resilient spiritus ended from the lowly status of an odalisque to become Suleiman's unrivaled consort by 1521, when she bore his firstborn son, Kesedi. The preserved correspondence in the Topkapi Palace archives unveils the depth of their emotional and physical connection. Suleiman's poetic compositions under the nom de plume, Mohibi, portray her as my heart's eternal tormentor and sweetest balm, while Harem's replies, infused with longing during his protracted military campaigns against the Habsburgs and articulate a passion that transcended the harem's utilitarian norms. In a bold defiance of the entrenched taboo prohibiting sultans from legally marrying their concubines, a custom upheld for over 3 centuries to preserve the Ottoman bloodline's supremacists, their bond in a ceremonial marriage circa 1533 to 1534, an unprecedented event accompanied by extravagant festivities that left the imperial court in a state of bewildered astonishment, as chronicled by the Austrian diplomat Ogier Gisela de Bousbecque in his letters home. This alliance yielded 6 children, flagrantly violating the one-son principle and igniting a maelstrom of palace intrigues, including pernicious rumors propagated by rivals that Harem employed sorcery or alchemical potions to sustain her exclusive hold over the Sultan's affections. Peirce's scholarly dissection illuminates how this near-monogamous devotion not only humanized Suleiman but also catalyzed the emergence of the Sultanate of Women, period spanning 1534 to 1683, during which valid sultans and favored consorts like Nurbanu Sultan, originally Cecilia a Venetian noble captured at sea and consort to Suleiman's son Selim II, exerted unprecedented sway over matters of reproduction and succession. Nurbanu, for instance, is depicted in historical accounts as initially employing mystical rituals or herbal remedies to secure monogamy with Selim until an heir was produced, only to subsequently advocate for expanded concubinage to generate additional sons, as evidenced by privy purse ledgers documenting stipends dispersed to 4 primary consorts, each responsible for birthing 1 male offspring, thereby fortifying the dynasty against the perils of a singular heir. This era also saw the harem evolve into a center of cultural patronage, with consorts commissioning poetry and art that subtly influenced the sultans' policies. In stark juxtaposition to Suleiman's measured restraint stand the documented excesses of subsequent sultans, where unchecked sexual indulgence frequently intersected with scandalous behaviors that precipitated broader perceptions of imperial decline and moral decay. Selim II, R. 1566 sampai 1574, infamously labeled the SOT due to his notorious proclivity for wine and revelry, was characterized as exceedingly lustful during his princedom in the detailed historical compendium Kun-i-Luber by Mustafa Ali, where he is portrayed as fathering numerous children with a rotating cadre of concubines even before his ascension. Though his reign saw a partial adherence to the one-son doctrine amid his administrative lapse, his successor Murad III R. 1574 to 1595 exemplifies the zenith of harem proliferation and its attendant complications. Initially plagued by rumors of impotence, as recounted by the Ottoman historian Ibrahim Pakaivi in his Tori-i, Murad surmounted these afflictions through interventions orchestrated by his mother, Nurbanu, potentially involving aphrodisiacs derived from ambergris or ritualistic incantations, and subsequently became extraordinarily prolific, siring more than 20 sons and 27 daughters with an extensive array of concubines, a fecundity that strained palace resources and contributed to elevated infant mortality rates from overcrowding and neglect. While Venetian diplomatic reports sensationally inflated his harem to encompass 1,200 women, archival evidence suggests a more realistic figure of 100 to 200 inhabitants, with actual sexual engagements confined to a select minority for strategic dynastic purposes, underscoring the gap between myth and reality. The archetype of excess, however, is embodied by Ibrahim I R. 1640 to 1648, dubbed the Mad for his erratic governance and psychological instabilities. Contemporary accounts, including the memoirs of Albertus Bobovius, a Polish convert serving as a palace musician, narrate Ibrahim's initial terrors of impotence, alleviated only through the persistent urgings of his regent mother, Kaksim Sultan, who encouraged him to immerse himself in the harem's offerings, culminating in lavish orgies that hemorrhaged the imperial treasury vast sums expended on opulent furs, rare jewels, and exotic perfumes for his transient favorites. Infamous legends, such as the purported mass drowning of 280 concubines in the Bosphorus out of jealous paranoia, a tale likely embellished for dramatic effect but rooted in verified executions, as detailed in Ottoman chronicles like Soluksad, ultimately precipitated his violent deposition in 1648 amid a Janissary uprising. Peirce's interpretive framework posits these episodes as symptomatic of deeper societal anxieties. A sultan's unrestrained sexuality was interpreted as emblematic of feeble leadership, starkly contrasting with the austere, disciplined household ideals espoused by the urban Ottoman elite and the ulama Islamic scholars. These excesses often led to financial strains, as harem maintenance costs soared, prompting reforms in later reigns. The taboos encircling the Sultan's sexual conduct extended far beyond the harem's gilded confines, profoundly shaping public perceptions, courtly etiquette, and even imperial policies. The long-standing prohibition against marrying concubines, predicated on safeguarding the Ottoman lineage from dilution by inferior social strata, constituted a core tenet until Suleiman's audacious transgression, which foreign envoys like Andrea Trevisan decried as a manifestation of enfeebled sovereignty in their confidential reports. The institution of slavery itself harbored inherent taboos in its enduring practice. Although Islamic jurisprudence sanctioned sexual relations with slaves contingent upon their humane treatment and conversion to Islam, the persistent Circassian slave trade formally outlawed in 1854, under international pressure, but clandestinely perpetuated into the late 19th century elicited mounting critiques from internal reformers and Western abolitionists. As poignantly articulated in the autobiographical writings of Harem Melik Hunk, a former harem inhabitant, homosexuality, prevalent in certain facets of Ottoman society, such as the communal bathhouses, hammams, or among the youthful pages of the palace school,